this is the same level as you would expect from Hollywood as far as quality of material.
Yeah. It is full of great messaging.
Mm-hmm.
It's real and raw. It's not your typical low quality, low budget kind of Christian film.
And they're shooting at ducks, and they're hitting ducks, and ducks are falling down.
Many ducks and fish were harmed in the filming of this movie. Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the Robertson family from Duck Dynasty and their new movie, The Blind. I'm sitting here with Thomas and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
So, guys, we all saw this movie, right?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
This week.
So, let's actually take a step back. How did this movie come to be? Who are these people? You know, why do we care?
Well, many people will be familiar with Duck Dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are not, it was a reality TV show that aired from 2012 to 2017.
Yep.
And follows a family, the Robertson family, and their family business of creating duck calls for duck hunting.
Right. And their business is called Duck Commander.
Yeah, Duck Commander. And they have all kinds of awesome products, but essentially it was following them as the Robertson family and their business and their everyday life. Yeah. And really, really wonderful show. It has a big cult following.
Yeah.
Highly recommend going and watching it if you haven't. But yeah, 2012, 2017. I don't remember how many. Was it like 11 seasons?
It was 11 seasons. I don't know how you work 11 seasons into 6 years, but somehow they did that, I guess.
But I mean, they still have a lot of influence today. They run a podcast called Unashamed.
Yeah. And I think there's some other people in the family who have podcasts as well, but Unashamed is the big one.
Yeah.
And big beards.
Big beards.
That's what they're famous for.
Yeah,
yes.
big beards, kind of ZZ Top-like beards.
Andrew is like a beginner Robertson. I don't even qualify.
Yeah. But they've been super popular in like conservative Christian circles for years.
Yeah. The Willie and Corey, Willie is the CEO of the company today and the son of Phil Robertson. They have made appearances in movies like God's Not Dead, the second one maybe.
I think so.
And they have big speaking gigs, basically, where they go and they talk about their worldview and what they think families should be doing and stuff like that.
Pro-family, pro-God, pro-Jesus.
Yes, unapologetically, and it's so
Unashamed.
Nice. So that's them, but then the Duck Dynasty show, Thomas, you've never seen it, right?
No, I've seen clips.
So until
kind
of our research,
yes.
What did you know about Duck Dynasty? Did you know anything?
Beards.
Okay.
Clearly.
I knew beards. That was about it. I think I knew that they were in like swamps of Louisiana somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Monroe.
Yeah. Other than that, very little. I've never been a big reality TV guy, so. Yeah,
I'm the same way, and I actively, to this day, avoid reality TV of all kinds. But when my mom started watching the show, and it was my mom, I was kind of like, why are you watching this? But it was on, so I kind of was in the room, and I saw some episodes. And then I was like, this is actually really fun and funny. And at the end of every episode, they have a big family dinner, and they end the episode with the family patriarch, Phil, saying grace for the whole table. And it's just so nice in the 21st century to see people doing that.
Yeah, they focus on closing the show with what is the most important to them. Love it.
And the other thing I liked about it, and the reason I started watching it, I was never religious about it, but I watched a few episodes, was they're just unapologetically promoting kind of their lifestyle, which is running around in the woods, doing stupid stuff, sometimes blowing stuff up, and doing a lot of hunting. I've never been a hunter, but running around the woods, blowing stuff up, I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Yeah, definitely. And they have a really kind of a wholesome lifestyle, in my opinion.
Vegans would disagree with you.
Vegans would disagree with me. Yeah, for sure. But that's okay. I'm happier. But they are in God's creation and focusing on being out in nature. They focus on the sanctity of the family unit and having a successful business and working together as a family and taking care of each other and taking care of your
having
community.
successful relationships as well. Yeah.
Right. It's not all about me with the Robertson family.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all about what are we doing here together.
Yeah. And at least in the show, I don't know about in real life, they're not tremendously high tech. There's not tons of them sitting in front of computers or playing on their phones or anything like that. They're always doing something physically in almost every scene. Yeah.
Hunting or fishing or something.
So that's kind of who the family is. And of course, the family patriarch is Phil Robertson. He's not the kind of the lead of the show, but he is in the show. The lead of the show is Willie Robertson, the CEO, who is the son of Phil. But this movie that they've now produced is about Phil. Real quick before we get to that, who produced this movie?
It was Willie and his wife, Corey.
Okay. So they, I guess, took their TV know-how.
Yeah. So you'd think after so many years of TV, hopefully they would know a thing or two about shooting film, but it really shows.
Yeah.
And we can get into this more, but
is this so they formed their own production company?
Yeah, they formed their own production company. I think that Corey, Willie's wife, was the producer. Corey's executive producer.
Okay.
Willie was executive
I'm sorry,
producer.
Willie was the executive producer.
Yeah.
So and I'm just wondering, do we know if this is their first film that they produced?
It is. The production company they have is actually called The Blind LLC.
Okay.
At least according to our brief research. If we get details wrong, Robertsons, we're sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for a first movie, it's impressive.
It is. So let's talk about the movie. So how does this movie open?
Well,
in a blind. It does, literally.
Literally in a blind, yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the name.
So it starts with Phil and his friend Big Al sitting in this duck blind with Phil kind of telling Al some of his story that Al didn't already know.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts with Phil's childhood.
Yeah.
And I'll just kind of run through it real quick. It starts with his childhood, and his parents are both neither one in the picture. Dad's off working on oil rigs. Mom is got some mental instability that just makes her not a good caretaker. So he, as the oldest child, has to kind of take care of his siblings. We get some of that. Then we cut to him as a football player in high school and his kind of first love, which is Miss K, as you may know from Duck Dynasty.
Still his wife today after 60 plus years.
Yeah, so they're high school sweethearts. They get pregnant with their first child, and then I think they get married after that. It's not entirely clear, but I think that's what the movie showed. Then we get him kind of setting up his career, going to college, successfully going to college. We learn that Phil apparently played football with...
at La Tech. Yeah, Louisiana Tech.
With... I'm so embarrassed, but I can't remember the name of this football player.
Terry Bradshaw.
Terry Bradshaw, yes. So Phil was actually...
And they were on the same team together.
Right.
And Bradshaw actually backed him up.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. If he had stayed on, because he quit.
Right.
If he had stayed on, he might have been the next Terry Bradshaw. And he talks about that in later interviews and says, well, I think both of us are pretty happy with how things turned out.
Yeah. Well, they turned out well for both of them, that's for sure. Yeah. So then after college, he kind of quits football to take care of his family, which has already got more than one child by that point. And we just follow the kind of their daily life a little bit of Phil and Miss K and their children. And we watch as Phil kind of spirals out of control. He goes from being an assistant or a teacher of English to he just quits after he falls in with Big Al and starts drinking too much. And he basically just gives up at some point and just starts doing whatever makes him happy, having his freedom. And eventually he kicks his family out and then goes and lives in the woods by himself.
Well, I mean, to back up slightly, I think an important aspect early on in the film is he has a kind of a dream of what he would love for his life to end up being.
Right. Yeah, and he does actually mention that to Kay out the gate.
Right. So what is that dream?
Well, that he'd love to have like a homestead on the river in the woods. Where he'd be fishing all the time and hunting ducks.
And that's a constant throughout the movie. He's always going fishing and hunting from childhood onward in every other scene, basically.
Right.
So then he does end up living down by, I don't know if it's a river or just a pond.
Or maybe a swamp bayou type
it's kind of swampy.
But clearly, despite his outward surroundings, Phil is in hell.
He is. Well, I mean, he is completely consumed with alcohol addiction, and it is ruining his life.
Alcohol addiction, and there's a less of a focus on this in the movie, but cigarettes as well. He's kind of pressured into it, and then
Big Al was
continuing to smoke throughout the movie.
Are those like themes? You've watched the show. Are either of those themes that ever come up in the show?
No, they don't drink or smoke.
The show's pretty lighthearted. There are so Phil in the show does do a lot of preaching at his grandkids.
Right.
We're talking about Duck Dynasty again as a contrast.
The show Duck Dynasty. So in that, there's one scene that I heard Willie talking about in a recent interview where Phil is talking to his grandkids, I think before prom or something like that, and he goes in details about all the STDs they don't want to get.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a fun show.
And well, it usually is, and I'm sure they played that scene for laughs with him kind of being all serious and then everyone being uncomfortable. But that's the kind of show it is. There's not really alcoholism or over tobacco use in the show itself.
Well, I guess I'm asking not even if they're using it. Is there any like commentary that it comes up in?
I don't recall there ever being. I mean, the closest thing to it is the fact that Cy, or Uncle Cy, tends to drink sweet tea constantly.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just almost an allusion to it.
Yeah.
The only time you get messages like that are, like I said, when it's Phil talking to his grandkids, giving them the grandpa speech.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a super widespread talked about thing these 10 years that Phil had as a raging alcoholic.
Yeah.
But
it was most of us didn't know anything about it until they started telling people about it in promotion for this movie.
Yeah, really. And I do recall in the show there being reference to Phil was a wild man for a time, and he was not walking with God for a time, and things were tough for a time, but they never went into great detail. So this is really the first open, this is my testimony kind of moments.
Yeah. So just to wrap up the summary of the movie, there's also a focus throughout the movie of the faithfulness of Miss Kay in taking care of her children and fighting for her marriage, even when Cy, Phil's brother, comes and says, "You don't deserve this. You should leave him." She says, "I'm going to fight for my marriage. My mom told me I was going to have to do that. I'm going to do it." And that's a focus throughout. And then also on Phil's sister, Jan, is I would think what they call her in the movie. I think her name is Janice, not Janet, which is what I said earlier.
Okay.
And Janice actually encourages her pastor to come talk to Phil, and they almost get in a fist fight. And the pastor in that scene has, I think, the best line in the movie.
Yeah. You want to say it?
Yeah. So
no, don't give it away.
It's a great line.
It's a great line. I'm going to say it. So Phil gets in the pastor's face because the pastor has intruded on his turf, basically. And the pastor says, now, and I'm paraphrasing.
Remember, the scene takes place in a bar.
It takes place in a bar.
That Phil happens to own at this point.
And Phil is looming over the pastor. And the pastor says, if you hit me, the Bible says, I have to forgive you. But it doesn't say that I can't be forgiven as well. So he's like, I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to defend myself. It's just such a great moment. I think that got a laugh from the entire theater.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was good.
Anyhow, Janice and her pastor and Miss Kay, through their prayer and I guess faithfulness, eventually the end of the story is Phil is reached.
Mm-hmm. He hits rock bottom.
He hits rock bottom, reaches out to this pastor, they talk, and then he ends up coming to Christ. And the movie kind of ends with his baptism. And then at the very end, you get kind of the intro to him starting to make duck calls. And of course, that's supposed to feed you into Duck Commander and Duck Dynasty, which you're supposed to kind of already know about.
Yeah. I think even if you didn't know about that already, it's still a gratifying movie of redemption.
Agreed.
But then, of course, I think most people who are going to see that probably already know about Duck Dynasty and Duck Commander.
There's a scene in the movie, actually, where Big Al and Phil have just been hunting, and Big Al says, man, Phil, you weren't even telling those ducks, you weren't even calling those ducks with your duck call, you were commanding them. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek moment for people who know the company.
Yep.
Yeah, I did get a sense from this movie that if you were a fan of the show, there probably were a lot of little homages to that throughout, which as I kind of think through it, and we did watch a few clips before preparing for this from the show, I could see that it would probably be pretty exciting to see that as a fan.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know who Cy was, his brother, and I noticed they were in the movie that do spend a significant amount of, his character is a significant character within the movie.
Yeah, so Cy in the show is he plays himself up as this kind of a little bit crazy, but not danger crazy, just funny crazy, old man who is always saying the craziest thing he can. And in the movie, they kind of show that aspect of his character from childhood onward. He's
the sense of humor, for sure. And he's an interesting guy in reality, and they note this in the movie. You know, he was a 25-year veteran of the United States Army, I believe.
And served in Vietnam.
He served in Vietnam. So he's a pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
Well, when he was the most stable, I guess also Janice, that they portrayed from the family.
Yeah, he and Janice were some of the younger siblings happened to be more stable consistently.
Well, at least from what we're told.
From the movie.
We don't know their stories so much because the focus is on Phil.
Right. Yeah.
But the implication is certainly that Cy is there showing up every day and even, to some degree being an uncle for these kids while Phil is off not showing up.
Mm-hmm. Sort of a tangent, but I wonder about the whole being forced to grow up too fast and take care of your family as the oldest, how that can impact somebody in adulthood.
Yeah, because at the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where Phil has already been having to hunt to provide food for the family. So he's off hunting. He hears an ambulance pull up to his house. He runs home, and the government, I guess, is stuffing his mother, who's kicking and screaming, into an ambulance, and they take her away. And then it's just him who's in the scene, doesn't look like he's 14 years old at that point.
Just a kid.
And he's got 3 younger siblings he has to take care of. So there's definitely the feeling that he had to grow up real fast. Mm-hmm. Another aspect is kind of the rags to riches thing.
Yeah, definitely. Because they were absolutely I think what he said, what did he say at the beginning? The narrator, it was the 1950s, but to us, it might as well have been the 1850s.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they were poor.
They were poor. They, it didn't look like they had any kind of electricity, any I guess there was running water. I don't know.
Yeah, they didn't, you say rags to riches. They didn't really get to the point where, he actually established the company or anything.
No.
They allude to it right at the end. But it's clear that the focus of the movie, and I would say that this is especially the case for Phil, was his testimony and how he was saved, and so he wanted that to be clearly the focus. At the end of the movie, there's this post, I don't know what you'd call it, post commentary interview that Phil gives, and so you actually see him, not the actor.
Yeah, the real man,
and he kind of explains or talks a little bit about, and with very clearly how his life was transformed by Christ. And so he does talk about, you just saw a movie where you saw,
sin, consumed by sin,
and it was his alcoholism and everything. And I would say that what impressed me about this, and there's Christians have been trying to do movies that are Hollywood quality for a long time.
Right.
And it's kind of been within just broader culture. When you talk about Christian movies, there's this immediate kind of almost everyone's suspicious that they're going to be really cheesy or poorly written or poorly acted, and the messaging the messaging is so prevalent that it overrides the story. It's almost like our criticism of Hollywood with woke messaging is what I think a lot of Christian movies have that same problem, is they're so focused on the message that everything else kind of falls away and is less, the story itself is not well developed or believable or any of this other stuff. Whereas,
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I think you've nailed it. That it's the same problem with wokeness and Christianity. The difference, of course, is Christianity actually has a good message, but it doesn't matter. It still makes a bad movie.
Right. And so what was refreshing about this one was this is a genuine story. It was well acted, well written, well directed, well filmed.
Yep.
And I think it was all filmed in Louisiana, so you got on site.
Yeah, Shreveport.
Yep.
You know, so you get a sense of this is what the area looks like in which they grew up and everything.
Yeah, you don't have the moment you have in some movies where you're looking at a hill that's clearly in California, and they're like, "Aren't these Alps nice?"
Yeah,
like,
it's not. We're not
super authentic.
It's not the Dukes of Hazzard.
Right.
But I was impressed by all of that, and the Christian messaging. It was well done, and it wasn't over the top.
Yeah.
It was just, this is my story.
The Christian messaging was clear and unequivocal.
Right.
But it wasn't in your face. It wasn't, this is the right thing to do, and he didn't do that, and so that's why things go wrong here. It wasn't spelled out the way it is in some Christian productions.
And one of the things I think was also helpful, especially this is true within any context, but I think sometimes there's a sense of which when you're sharing the gospel with somebody, the instinct is to have, there's this immediate response and the lights show on there, but like they come to faith right then. But for most of us who've experienced sharing the gospel with our friends, there's generally not an immediate response. And it's generally, if we do see, by God's grace, they come to faith, it's lots of times it's over a lot of time and different things occurring. And so the expectation of, I'm just going to say it and they're going to be like, yay, and believe is generally not what happens. And I think this story kind of demonstrates that. I was, in watching this, they kind of depict Miss Kay as maybe even from a child being a believer. They show her going to church, and she's real concerned about living out her faith there. And throughout, she's like concerned about taking the kids to church and everything, and she wants to fight for her marriage and things like that.
Yeah.
And so you get the sense that she was a believer. I mean, there's clearly some decisions she would made that I would say as a believer you shouldn't make, like marrying a non-believer. Although,
it's not clear that Phil would have said he wasn't a believer when they got married.
True.
Yeah.
True. That's okay. That's fair.
More than likely, he was probably more of like a cultural believer. I mean,
cultural Christian.
I mean, he wouldn't have said he's an atheist. He wouldn't have said he's another religion.
Yeah.
He just, didn't really care all that much about Christianity.
Yeah.
From the way the film depicts it.
And they don't get into this in the film, but, we looked it up, and the film does show that she's pregnant in high school.
Yeah.
But it does say that she got married at 18, and I think she's supposedly a junior in high school when she gets pregnant.
Yeah, so I just did a little research on this. So according to an interview fairly recently, Al, the oldest son, the oldest child, said he was born when his mom was 15. That's what...
Oh, 15.
15. So apparently junior in high school was 15 for her.
Okay. So I didn't realize it was even that early. Yeah. So, I mean, I can see... especially at that time in history, you're, and I could see Phil wanting to do the right thing. He seemed to want to do the right thing and marry her. And
his early life is kind of marked by him trying to rise to the challenge of his life, which is taking care of his family, his siblings, and then taking care of this girl he loves, who he wants to be worthy of. Because it's in the movie, when they're children, he's poor, she's wealthy, at least compared to him, and so he's trying to be worthy of that.
Yeah. I would say it was, although tough to watch, refreshing and different than most Christian type films in the depictions, the very raw depictions of his alcoholism and his ramblings and living life, hard and fast. For anyone who has had a experience like that in life, this one might be a tough one to go see.
Yeah, if that's something that's a trigger.
Yeah,
for you.
Yeah, because it was pretty raw, in my opinion.
And the relationship between Phil and Miss Kay at times becomes fraught because she's trying to encourage him to be a stand-up guy and take care of his wife and his children, and he's not really all that focused on that at that point in his life.
He's absolutely...
We see womanizing. I think they've said in interviews that he did cheat on her at that time, but that's not shown explicitly in the movie because it's not that kind of movie. There are some scenes where Miss Kay is getting in his face because he's, usually in these scenes. He's drunk and angry usually. And you do kind of feel fear for her because he's this huge guy and she's not. I will say, though, except for one scene where he's holding her arm and she says, "You're hurting me." Other than that, while he does get violent, he never gets violent with her. He doesn't lay a hand on her.
Yeah. It never said that. It never alluded to her being physically harmed.
No.
Now, what does appear to have been harmed in this film, mortally so, are some ducks.
Yes.
It's true.
Yes.
Yeah, you were mentioning that earlier, how well, go ahead and talk about
I
it.
was watching these scenes because I'm so used to Hollywood, and I don't know when Hollywood kind of adopted this policy. Probably it was in the late 70s, early 80s, but that, you used to see this, no animals were harmed in the filming of this movie.
Right, at the end of the movie.
That I don't think can be said about Duck Dynasty.
Yeah.
No.
Or about The Blind. There's several scenes of them, they're hunting ducks and they're shooting at ducks and they're hitting ducks and ducks are falling down.
Many ducks and fish were harmed in the filming of this movie.
Yeah. So, anyway, I've only been not duck hunting, quail hunting we were going to go quail hunting. We ended up pigeon hunting in a farm, which I don't believe I even hit one of those things.
Man,
but it was fun.
I've got some pigeons in my yard that have no fear anymore. I'm just kind of like, well, dang, there's good eating on a pigeon. I guess they're technically mourning doves or wood doves.
Oh, mourning doves are different from pigeons.
They're closely related though.
They are related.
Fun fact: about 4 years ago, I bought all the stuff to go dove hunting. I was like, I'm going to do it, and then I had my first kid, and I still haven't gone yet.
Oh yeah.
I intend to.
Do you have
if the Robertsons see this, I would love to be invited to go and blow some ducks up.
Well, you were saying you have gotten down there, at least to their neck of the woods before.
Yes,
right?
I have been down to Monroe on a road trip. We were going to a different spot in Louisiana back when my wife's sister was in school in Louisiana. And on the way back, we stopped by the Duck Commander warehouse and got our pictures in front of it, and that was really fun. And then we went and we ate at the I think it's Willie's Duck Diner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And delicious food, by the way. This was a number of years ago, but yeah, it was kind of cool to see the place.
So at the diner, did you eat duck?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And possum and a bunch of stuff. There's some random things.
Did you eat any of the catfish?
I can't remember. It was a sampler, so I think there might have been some catfish.
Catfish, that's normal. That's normal, I think, in all parts of the South. But possum.
I'm pretty sure that possum was on there.
I'm not sure if I'd be brave enough to eat possum. That seems like one of those animals you'd rather not eat. But
it's delicious. It's pretty greasy, though.
Yeah,
I bet. It looks like a giant rat.
But tastes real good.
Yeah. This movie, I think, grabbed our attention for a couple of reasons. But let's just dive into those. Why do we think this is important? Why do we like this movie so much?
It's not woke.
It's not even a little bit.
Which is kind of what we're looking for on this podcast most of the time.
That's one of our big criteria for movies we like.
Yeah. It is full of great messaging.
Mm-hmm.
It's real and raw. It's not your typical low quality, low budget kind of Christian film. And
yeah, we've talked about that a little bit. I'll add, I noticed the music throughout and that it was a good score for a movie. That's an important thing to have. Mm-hmm. Not all movies have it, not even all successful movies have it, but this one I think did. And also it was gripping. Like it was a good drama, just period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking it might be of the quality that wins awards. I don't think it will win any awards for various reasons, but I think one of them is that I think every single person in this movie is white.
Is there an award for that?
No.
The woman he was selling the fish to.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
She was
black.
But
the Oscars now, as of 2024, you have to have a certain number of non-white people in your movies.
It would never have been considered irrespective.
Well, because they're literally blowing ducks out of the sky.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's what it looks like, though. I mean,
maybe it's not real, but it looks real.
I'm pretty sure it's real.
Some of the best CGI I've ever seen if it isn't real.
Yeah.
I would say that what is exciting about this film to me is it shows that how decentralized the industry is becoming, because you can have production companies like that and produce this quality of a film, and they don't have to answer to Hollywood for any of this stuff.
Not even a little bit.
And yet, I mean, it's a great movie. And so that's exciting in and of itself. And I know this is just one of many of these. And so this kind of decentralizing of the film industry, I think, is in the long run, it's going to be a good thing for movies, because we need more variety and themes and views than what we get from kind of the mainstream Hollywood.
Yeah, the term I use thrown around is heterodoxy. Heterodoxy, which is you need different thoughts to be allowed to coexist with one another. Even bad thoughts. If people can't say the bad thing, then you can't come up with a good argument to defeat the bad thing.
You know, not every idea, not every film obviously is going to be worth it, but having the freedom to at least have that ability more so than we ever have seen. And I just think that was one of the number one things that I took away from this film, was that this was as good. I mean, acting, like we've already said, this is the same level as you would expect from Hollywood as far as quality of material, of the film. And so the story itself was, interesting, well done, well acted. I mean, it was gripping. You learn something about this family that, I mean, like I said, I didn't know anything about these folks at all. I know a little bit more. But you don't have to have kind of like, I think you were saying, you don't have to have known anything about Duck Dynasty, and you'll still appreciate this movie.
You don't even have to know that it's a true story, I don't think, to have it have meaning and be an effective movie.
Yeah.
I do think that clip at the interview at the end is helpful in that, because it did tell you right at the beginning that this is based on a true story.
Yeah. I think the term Willie used I listened to Willie and Corey speak to Jordan Peterson in a podcast. I think what he said is it's not based on a true story. It is a true story. I think that's what he said.
Maybe that's what...
I don't know if that's what they have in the credits, but I think that's what he said.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what they produce in the future. I mean,
right, because they do intend to make more things. They said this is their first, implying there will be more.
That's great. I'll go watch it.
Well, I mean, their record with success with Duck Dynasty, they've obviously been involved in the entertainment industry.
Yep.
So they seem to have a good understanding of it.
And if you're listening to this and it's still in theaters,
go
check it out, because I know it's a limited run.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to find, but they originally, I think, only had a contract for 1 week in theaters. Of course, they're trying to negotiate and get more runtime. So we saw this in its second week. The podcast will be out in its third week, so you may have trouble finding it, but if you can, you should go see it. And if you can't, I'm sure it'll come out on Blu-ray and you'll be able to buy it. And I advise you to do that, because if you are listening to this podcast because you like what we're doing and you want more positive, non-woke media, you should support stuff like this. It's the kind of thing you like. It's the kind of people you're fighting for.
Vote with your dollars, folks.
Yeah.
I know it's grossed roughly 11 million, a little over 11 million.
Yes, according to Box Office Mojo, which normally is accurate. In this case, I wonder, because
it's not so mainstream.
I wonder how accurate it is. But $11 million is not terrible.
I don't
know how much this
depending
cost.
on what the production was cost.
But I bet you they're going to make a profit.
Yeah, and it might be because kind of like within the Christian genre, they probably tend to make more money on their DVD sales than in the theaters.
Yeah.
Usually, yeah. And that's just that's what I really appreciated about this. It's a Christian movie, and we've said this many times. It just feels Hollywood quality, which you've seen a few times. Passion of the Christ, some other biblical movies, Ben-Hur, and then like Prince of Egypt. But a lot of the Christian movies Christians like are things that don't quite have that same feel of quality. The Fireproof people. They make good movies. They make good messages. It's a good sermon. It's not such a good movie. And
there
this,
is a difference.
I feel like, is a good movie. And it's also a good message.
Yeah. Go see it.
Yep. All right. I guess that's it. We kind of wrapped that up naturally. That's kind of awesome.
Yeah. Fantastic.
All right. This has been the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew. We hope you'll tune in next time. The Pop Culture Contrarian is brought to you by the Patriot Post. The Patriot Post can be found at patriotpost.us. It is the oldest news, policy, and opinion digest on the web. It's right. It's free. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.